Can. Hey guys, Keith Keller, Melbourne, Australia, and you're watching Better Than Real Life Events. It's a brand new show we're doing here on StreamYard, and we have a fantastic global panel calling in from all over the world, quite literally, Australia, Canada, Ireland, the US, and we're really asking the question, what's going on here with Facebook and Google and the idea of paying for news? So it's a big story. It's moving every day. Some people said yes, some people said no. They've backstepped, they've changed things around, and it's a story it's evolving, and it should have probably global ramification once we sort this out, using Australia as the testing ground. 25 million people here, fairly low-end market in terms of global populations, so we can afford to be a bit of a testing ground, I guess. And I want to hear what everyone has to say about this. You can follow along on the hashtag that we're using there, BTRL events, Better Than Real Life. We're going to be running a series of events around this idea very, very shortly. And the thing that's very exciting about StreamYard is you can now watch this show on Facebook, on YouTube, and also on Twitter. So we're very, very excited to get that moving. I'm going to introduce the guests one by one, but I want to start with Debbie because she was the inspiration for this show. We did a show a couple of weeks ago about the evolution of the internet back in 1998 when Google was invented, but it's moved so faster in the last couple of weeks. So I just want to bring Debbie in to talk about what's going on here and what are the real issues that we're talking about here with the Google and the Facebook idea and how we now view news and pay for news.
Good evening, Keith. Thank you so much for, am I hearing an echo? Anybody else in here?
I can't hear anything.
Okay.
I think we're right.
Okay.
You're going to hear yourself in stereo.
I am hearing. Maybe I'll turn speakers down. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing me on board. We did discuss this. This is a very big issue happening. Technical difficulty here. I think I'm in the backstage as well.
Oh, okay. Well, no worries. We've got you on live, but that we'll bring you back in. Let's bring Tony into while you go and sort that out. This is live streaming, guys. Live streaming. Anything can happen. So Tony's in Edmonton. We've been talking about this process. Google and Facebook have now been asked to pay for the news feed, and this could be something that maybe they'll roll out in Canada. What do you think the ramifications are here, and what's the real issue?
Well, this doesn't surprise me. I mean, we've been watching this since the big Facebook trials and all the trials that happened in the US, and we were thinking some kind of action would happen, right? But just like the Trump debacle and how nothing happened. Nothing really happened with regulation there either, right? Not a surprise that we're seeing some regulation being brought into, into the whole online world. It's been some time, right? And I did see something in Canada as well that we're looking to follow suit. I'm sure we'll see more of this. I honestly think this is probably really ripe for development and for solutions that can really work with this. We're seeing this happening more in platforms. I mean, you look at Twitter as an example, and Facebook even themselves blocking users, and then having some issue with things like this coming up. It's an interesting time in social, right? I think that Australia is a real compelling kind of beaconing light that this is just more of this to come. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with you. I would agree with you there, and it's really interesting. I mean, as an Australian in a market of 25 million, compared to the US market, which is 330 million population, the world players can afford to play in the small markets to get this right. Obviously, we're the ones that are suffering because of that, and Debbie's got some thoughts on that because she's been listening to quite a lot of material. She's going to just try and get back in and out. But I'd like to bring Simon in from Ireland because that's the European perspective. What are you hearing about this, Simon, and what do you think the ramifications are here?
Well, Keith, it's great to be here with everybody. From this side of the water, the
we got some internet problem there. Maybe you've locked up. All right, we'll come back to that. We're really running the gauntlet now of bad internet. Partially what we're talking about. Elaine, what's your thoughts there?
Well, it's sort of interesting. Canada's not, people-wise, an awful lot bigger than Australia. We're at almost 38 million. We're kind of few and far between because it's a humongous country. But on the 18th of February, Reuters put out the story that Canada is like ready to Me Too, jump on the back of Australia.
Wow.
And want to be the next ones to go after, in Canada's case, specifically Facebook for news. And that's one thing I want to talk to, and I want to get everybody else's sort of concept. I don't think Facebook and Google are the same. I don't think Google is first and foremost a search engine. That's not Facebook's first, second, 10th, or 50th iteration. They do so many other things first that, to me, it would make more sense to charge Facebook for the news, because Google is actually furthering the news carrier's information, if you will.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm actually extremely interested in what you've said there, because I was a bit surprised personally to think that Google would have to pay for a service that actually is actually a service to humanity. I still can't get my head around why Google's paying for this. I mean, for me, Google is providing a news service. It's not benefiting in any way, except if maybe they get ads from that. Are they benefiting? They don't profit from giving you the news. How does Google profit?
No, they do. I disagree. Well,
They
yeah.
do.
Okay, well, let's play that out. What are they doing?
Google profits by delivering the news, because that's what appears in the Google feed, right? And all the Google sites and that sort of thing. And they're getting that content for free, fundamentally, right? They're not paying for it, but yet they use that information of you and me going to a certain site and watching it and reading it to say, hey, we can advertise to you, everybody specifically, because of the searches that I've done, because of, the information that I've received as well. So they're not using it directly. They're using it indirectly to say, hey, we'll show you these news feeds on this article or whatever. But we're gonna track you, and we're going to then sell you to advertisers. So Google is getting paid for it.
It's an issue. It's an issue right now with hate news. Hate news itself is driving revenue from Google, right? Yeah. And it's an issue with how this has to be further filtered, and really does allude to some of the regulation required. And just one comment on Google. Google started as a search platform. they are way past that, right?
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
yeah, they really have gone past that on a number of fronts. They're really, that's not even their main focus for sure anymore.
Well, it's not, but you can't take search out of the equation. Okay, that's like, I was saying to Deb earlier, it's like, the biggest library in the world with no Dewey Decimal System. How the hell do you find a book? Okay,
Yeah, that's actually quite a good analogy. The idea of a big library with no system to find things.
yeah,
Right, but along those same lines, just as a point of reference, the library does go out and purchase those books, right? So from a content
Yes.
perspective, they don't
Yeah.
get the books for free. The libraries, they say, "Hey, we'll pay for these books," and maybe they get a publisher's rate or something, but they actually have to buy them and put money out to get that content into the library.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think that's the comparison that's important too. Is that, look, I understand that in some cases it is an overreach of government to say, "Hey, we're going to tax you, tax Google, and tax Facebook for this information." But if you kind of go down the food chain, they're kind of up at the top of the food chain. But if you look down multiple levels, like who's actually producing that content, it's people like you and me, and writers and authors and content experts and consultants and coaches. And if they are able to get that information for free, and I know there's a trade-off here too,
yeah.
but who actually gets paid for that is fundamentally what we're saying, is that Google is almost $1 trillion company, and if it's getting content for free, does it not have a responsibility to say, "Hey, wait a sec, we did get this from someone else"?
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I
let
don't.
you keep going, Elaine. That's good.
I was gonna say I don't disagree with you there, Doyle. But in terms of small entrepreneurs, without the search engines, where do we get our clients? And for those of us that are SEO and
It's a mutually
social,
beneficial relationship. Like it's like
it is.
almost like
It's
a
symbiotic.
parasite or a parasitic.
Symbiotic, not a parasite.
No, it's the Trill version. It's the Dax in Deep Space Nine. There's this beautiful woman with a little creature inside it, and the creature inside it feeds the memories of the Dax creature. But the Dax creature, played by a woman, is actually the entity. But really, she's fed by a symbiotic relationship with a being that has lived 6 times. This is a Deep Space Nine reference. But anyway, I want to bring Simon back in just to see if we can get that working. You've made the trouble, and I want to give you preference because it's really late there.
Deep Space Nine, back to you, Simon. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think I caught Deborah's technical issues for some reason. I dropped in and out, so apologies. Your original question, Keith, was about what was the perception from this side of the planet.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think my personal opinion originally was that it was a little bit of bravadery from the big tech players. There was a bit of showboating. This would never happen. Don't be ridiculous. It would never. They would never pull out. So from this perspective, that was the initial thoughts. And then when we saw sites going dark, if you like, or not available, in terms of, Facebook, for example, it kind of went, actually, there's a bigger, wider question here in terms of who controls the news flow, right? Which is an old argument. And the thing I would offer to everybody here and to people watching is, there's a dilemma with news in general, whether it's search engines or whether it's traditional broadcast news or, everything from newspapers to radio. I don't know about you guys, but the subscriptions that I have now for, let's call it mainstream news, just keeps going up and up. I'm paying people, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times. My subscriptions just keep going up and up and up. And I keep promising myself that I'll have this subscription detox because God knows how many thousands of dollars a year I'm spending at this stage. But then there's also a huge privilege which comes with that news access because you can afford it. You're in an economy where you can afford that news access. And I think when you take away news access for whatever the reason, there's a wider implication to society that says if I can't afford news, or if I can only access ad sponsored news? Is that a different type of news? And is the quality of the news different? And we've all seen very different quality of news, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm just a little bit wary in terms of the shift in the news agenda is very clearly in the hands of the technical giants, right? The big 4 or 5 tech giants. They're in control of the news, be under no illusion. There are some diehards in your neck of the woods that the Murdoch empire is alive and well. And over here, as you know, it reaches, its tentacles reach here too. But at least there is a few other options. But I think the tech giants, if they can turn a tap on or off and decide what you can and can't see, that leads you down a government path. And I know particularly your federal government was very articulate around the fact that this should not happen under any circumstances. And there were some quite heated conversations from your side of the world, and rightly so. But I think there's 2 stories here. Well, there's 3 stories, if you like. There's the tech control of news away from traditional media. There's if I can afford to get what, let's call it quality, and I'm using inverted commas, quality news, because I can afford to pay for it, assuming it is quality, does that actually propel the third issue, which is a 2-tier news society, where you end up with people in less privileged areas or in developing countries where their news is not subscription because they're not paying for it. So they just get news that's served up by these algorithms that are heavily sponsorship driven or large advertiser driven. I think that's a third dilemma. And of course, the governments will need to play a part in this.
Can I just jump in there and say, do you
Sure.
think that what you're saying there is any different to what we've already had? Like, I mean, there's three commercial channels that have news on at 7 o'clock at night, but they have to fund those with ads. We have one station, the ABC, which is free to us, the consumer, but it is funded by the government, effectively our taxpayers' money. So is that any different to what they're proposing, or is it a deeper level of sort of subterfuge in a way, sort of deeper level of division?
I'm not sure. I think it's a change for sure. If you take in the United Kingdom, the BBC, what was the British Broadcasting Corporation, doesn't run ads in theory. They're not allowed to run ads because they're funded by the taxpayers of the UK. And you pay a television, they're funded by the UK through a television license, not through a direct tax on income. And it's the same in Ireland. You know, the state broadcaster in Ireland, RTE, for its news output is paid for by a TV license. But that model is changing. That model is changing significantly here because the amount of money that it's costing to produce original content from state-funded broadcasters keeps going up. And the competition from the self-funded, non-state, non-government news sources are basically doing a better job. You've only got to look at the Netflix success globally in an international perspective compared to, you know, going to the cinema or watching terrestrial television. And let me
pick up on this. I really want to pick up on this, and I want to also bring in Debbie because she's had some technical problems, and we want to bring her back. My gut feeling is that Netflix, $10 a month for unlimited TV, no ads, which is my favorite model in the world. Like as a consumer, that's just a model of the world I could live with all my whole life and several lifetimes to come. You know, I love Spotify. $10 a month for unlimited music, no ads. I'm choosing what I watch. I'm choosing what I listen to. And there's no interruption and there's no agenda. I've paid them $10 for a service. I pay a fee, I get a service. I wonder whether news will eventually go down that path, and there's danger there because the people that can't afford that will just simply not get news. Yeah.
Just let me throw one more thing in, and then I'll let others jump in on this conversation. But one other important point: as a father, none of my children, and I'm sure if people here have children or have relatives and friends who have children, they do this argument. I often stop myself and think, is this just an argument that just people like us are having? Because honestly, I could not pay any. It doesn't matter how much money I offered to my children. I couldn't get them to watch terrestrial television. Never mind a news channel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They just don't do it. The television to my children, and I have 4 children, is YouTube. It has been since they could pick up a mobile device and swipe.
Yeah.
They do not, do not watch it, will not watch it, are not interested in it. So I think at the moment we are in we're struggling with the change of a model, but the next generation coming through, they're not even on the model we're arguing about here. So I just want to throw that into the conversation too.
That's right. They're not even in the model. But let's bring Deb back. First of all, did you solve your problem with sound and internet? And it must have been something to do with that funky filter. We'll get that Polaroid out, and you look like you jumped straight in from 1978, an episode of Buck Rogers or something. But
oh dear, it's lighting. It's lighting.
No, don't worry. Have we got you though? Have we got you?
Okay.
Can we hear you? And is your internet working?
Thank you. My internet is working, and I'm just thank you everybody. I mean, everybody's that they brought up. I mean, Simon, you were talking about paying for subscriptions. I mean, that was something that Elaine and I were discussing earlier in the day, is that, the news for the news outlets I'm talking in regards to like Washington Post, New York Times, we are already paying for those subscriptions. The Economist, you get a snippet free that you can utilize, but you're paying for that anyway. So that's not through Google. You're getting it through a subscription through the publication. So, who is really benefiting by taxing or penalizing, Google for offering up advertising or offering up news? And really, when I was listening to Senator Lambie earlier today, and her point was that this isn't going to make a difference for the major news corporations. This is going to a point that Elaine brought up, this is going to hurt the end user. This is going where possibly the end user is going to have to pay more. And we're already paying more. We're paying more for the ISP. We're paying to use the internet itself. We're already doing these.
Yeah.
So if Australia chooses to go in this direction, which other countries may consider this as well, who does this actually benefit? And the benefit that I'm seeing is it benefiting the government itself? That's kind of the question. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, Elaine, you were mentioning Plex, and I thought I'd pick up on that, but also you were also mentioning there with Deborah. What are your thoughts on what we've just discussed and how it relates to what you've just asked about Plex?
Well, yeah, Plex is, well, I guess if you have a server, you pay for it like anything else, like Roku, like Netflix, like Acorn. There's a million services out there, and as Simon said, if you pay for your news as well, those subscriptions can really get up there. My youngest grandkids are 7 and 4. It would never occur to them to turn on a TV channel. They automatically go to Plex and or Netflix for everything that they want if they're going to use something like that. So what Simon said about young people, I see us, and I've said this before about social as well, I see us in the next 5 to 7 years transitioning out of social the way it is now. It's going to become something completely different. And part of that, I think you're already seeing in Clubhouse, this Apple only, iOS only platform for phones and tablet or iPads that is audio only. It's quick, it's easy to consume, it's easy for anybody and everybody who is on iOS to get, but it gives people a quick and easy way to connect.
Yeah, and chat about the issues of the day.
Yeah, but it's not at the moment, there's no additional fees, there's no issues with what you're seeing, but excuse me, that's part of this whole thing. It's why I said Google was so different, and what Deb and I were talking about earlier. Google and Facebook, again, yes, Doyle, to your point, yes, Alphabet and Google is way bigger than it was. But the search engine piece, I think, is critically important for the end user. No matter what you do with anything else, okay, Google, Bing, Yandex, they stand apart. They're not in the same bucket as Facebook.
Yeah.
Well, and you bring up a good point with search, because what about how search itself is being filtered, right? Like you know, like you look at the election in the US and certain things that I would see in Canada, and then when I'd be talking to a colleague in the US and what they would actually be seeing. Very different, right?
Wow.
So,
wow.
Absolutely.
Right. So it really begs the question of what are we really not seeing or seeing, and what is the right thing to be considered in there? I mean, I've worked in telecom. I know how CRTC in Canada controls and regulates, like, you know, communication and media and things like that. But those lines are blurring so much, right? Like you have everything. You don't know if you're watching a TV show on a network or on your computer, right? There's this whole blend and everything's coming together. So I think we are seeing this, and this is probably the first indicator out there of some really rapid changes that are happening, right? Or afoot.
So, yeah, can I just add to what Elaine and Tony are both saying there, just in terms of search? Because I think what's fascinating, I was reading, looking at some of the, I think it was Simon Kemp's annual digital survey that he puts out. And, you know, the stat that caught my eye was around 50% of all search is voice now.
Yeah.
And that stopped me in my tracks as well, because I now constantly ask a voice assistant, whether it's the Amazon device or the Google device or I've stopped asking Siri because she keeps getting things wrong. But I get my news served to me because I ask for it. Yeah. And it just tells me, and it plays what I want to hear, whether it's The Economist or whatever the different news outlets we were talking about earlier. And then that reminds me of the other impact, which is touching back to what Tony's saying there about the search and who's controlling it, because you've only got to go to different versions of Google in different countries to see that you're getting served completely different information depending on where you live. That's a fact. But also things like Amazon when you're shopping. I know this is about news, but it's the same algorithm story.
Yeah.
That if you shop if you just say to Amazon, I need batteries, you know, and Amazon decides that, well, you can have these or these, but it leaves out the 6 other competitors, then you're only served what they want to serve and what they've got margin on. And of course, with Amazon, they're very cute, clever, and they do their own Amazon products as well once a product becomes popular. But I think the voice element, whether it's Clubhouse or whatever Twitter Spaces becomes, and I'm sure it won't be long before Instagram and Facebook have something, and LinkedIn will buy one of them or do
Facebook's
something.
already working on it,
right? But I think the just talking to a device doesn't even have to be a smartphone in the future, but just saying, what's the news? What's the weather? We've been doing that for years. And I think it's the algorithms that decide that. So then if there's a block because somebody's not getting paid to serve up that news, you can ask that computer AI all you like to serve you the news, but it's not going to. It's not going to be this, isn't the internet great? It's an equal playing field. It's a leveler for the human race. It's access to all this information. No, if the news producer isn't getting paid, they can just say no.
And this is sort of what you're saying, Debbie, isn't it? That if we, in reality, the gut feeling around is that the person that's going to actually suffer is the person in the street.
I see.
Is that what you're thinking?
I'm seeing that this is not going to impact Google and Facebook. It's going to impact the end user. Yeah. It's going to impact the ability for the end user. And absolutely, I mean, search results, we know, go by location, proximity, where, mobile search is where we're moving to. And that's going rapidly, and that's why you're getting those geo searches. And whether I'm searching here when I'm in Connecticut or whether I'm in Vienna, my search is going to be different unless I'm very geo specific about it. So, I mean, the algorithm is going to be serving up proximity, location, and relevancy to the query. That's what Google does. That's what Google does best. As for who is this going to benefit, I think that's where I was going before, is that if we take news and pull it off of Google, who does it hurt? It hurts the end user, and it also drives up the expense of Google. Does make, I mean, Google's whole platform of making money is from Google Ads. I mean, that Google AdWords has been around since the beginning of time. You know, for 2008, we're doing AdWords. That's the majority of where their money is coming from search, is from Google advertising. And now it's switching, obviously, to mobile advertising and LSA and going into that direction. But if we pull news out of it, who does this benefit? It doesn't benefit the end user. It hurts the small user. It hurts those of us who want to advertise our small businesses, because we're going to be wiped out with that space being taken up by the big conglomerates.
Let's bring Doyle in here. Let's bring Doyle in on this, because there's two things I want to pick up on. One is Doyle had a very sharp observation that Google is benefiting, and I really want to pick up on that. But we really haven't talked about Facebook very much. You know, what is Facebook got to gain, and what has the end user got to lose with all of this? So Doyle, pick it up where you've got a couple of really great comments there. Pick it up on what we've chatted about so far as it relates to Google, but more importantly, how it relates to Facebook. Why is Facebook involved, and how will that change the paradigm?
Well, yeah, look, Facebook and Google are slightly different entities, but they are obviously global or universal, or whatever the case may be in our universe anyways. But I think fundamentally it comes down to content, and I posed some questions there in the chat, like who is the ultimate product here? And in most cases it is us. It's us as the users, right? We become the product because Facebook uses our information in how they then use that algorithm and how they display ads and that sort of thing. And kind of a funny story, but I think it would have been like about 10 years ago, I created this Facebook group called Mark Zuckerberg Owes You Money, based on the premise that, you know what, we are the product, and you know what, if I'm contributing to that advertisement, you know, maybe it's more like sort of a Bitcoin situation where it's like an infinitesimally small piece, you know, why aren't I being compensated for it? Because, and I'm talking loosely, I'm not talking like producing content, I'm just saying because you're serving me ads, I'm the target of that ad, therefore you're getting money for that. And I mean, we're talking about socialism and capitalism and all that kind of thing, but just to start the question on that. So Facebook really has a lot invested in this, and fundamentally they make money from advertisers who then use your information to say, well, Doyle likes technology, he likes, you know, reading, he's business, you know, that sort of thing. So you can become very, very targeted.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree, Doyle. And one thing that really sticks out to me, and I just wanted to pipe up, is Cambridge Analytica. Yeah. Look at what happens when things are left off track, right? Like there was some real manipulation there, but I think more than just controlling it, it's about filtering fake news. It's about controlling things that are influencing people. More and more young people don't watch the news. They get the news from these social platforms, right? And they have been shown to manipulate the vote, to manipulate a number of...
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like the information of what is the news is a huge question, right? But based on my interests and based on what I click on and what news link I watch or read or whatever, Facebook then can redirect ads and change how I appear to them. So I could become... I mean, and people have tested this too. It's like they just go to, for example, you know, Trump websites, and eventually their whole feed changes to sort of that political spectrums, or if you're a Hillary Clinton lover or hater or whatever, so you can actually manipulate that outside of things. But fundamentally it says that you become what you read and what you watch and what you see with Facebook, and Facebook uses that. And you know what? It's a business. It's online. We're kind of all in this together, but we have to decide, okay, where's the value coming from? Is it from the actual end user? Is it from the advertisers? Is it from the businesses? Where, or the content producers as well? And I think that's the question that Australia asked, was where is this value equation lying? And maybe there's something that we need to look at. Facebook honestly has killed industries too, previously, and based in in the publication type industries before, like I think about 8 years ago, like businesses were wiped off the map, overnight, because Facebook changed how they deliver some of these news products and that sort of thing. So they can do it now as well, and they have, and they will, and they continue to. And the problem is that they do have a lot of power, but as a business, you need to recognize that, what's my strategy? Is Facebook my only platform that I'm using? And if it is, we need to say, well, what else is out there?
Yeah, well, let me jump in there, because now I'm going to hit this from completely the other side. Okay, not Facebook or Google or any of that, but from the news perspective. Okay, let's be honest here. If you're a Trumplican, you're going to be watching Fox News. If you're normal, sorry, I didn't say that word. You're going to be watching MSNBC or BBC, please God. CBC, not so great. I find CTV in Canada to be incredibly liberal. But each of these news outlets have their own bent.
Yeah, okay? Of course.
They lean wherever the hell they lean. So whatever news you get is going to be colored, first of all, by who pays the paychecks to the journalists that work for them. Okay. Ariana Huffington does Huffington Post and does it really well, and I really like that. But you've got them, you've got Mashable, you've got all these other bits that give up news, but none of it, okay, take any 5 of them any time of day or night, and there is going to be a different slant from whatever their leanings are. So for me, it's not just about the journalism. It comes back to really what Deb and I talked about earlier today. It's that end user. And Doyle, to talk to the Facebook thing, well, we are the product. And yeah, it'd be nice if they paid us, but they're allowing you to use that platform, make friends, have relationships, go on video, do all these things and pay nothing.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes out in the wash there.
Can I look at,
sorry, Keith, I was just going to say it's a complex web that we weave, isn't it? Because to Elaine's point, there's an awful lot of people, I think, who watch the news or receive the news or listen or read the news from people and commentators and agencies and organizations that validate their own beliefs.
Of course.
Because there's more than one side to a news story. And we see more and more of that. The irony of that, I suppose, is that a lot of those beliefs that you are reinforcing by watching certain channels, depending on which side of the fence you sit on, have actually been fed to you in the first place anyway. So the algorithm builds on it. And I think, to one of the earlier points, the algorithm seems to serve more of the same, and it doesn't do much in terms of differentiation or balanced views. And I think that's something we need to work on. That's something that I think we've missed in this. And the other thing in terms of news, there's also a very interesting trend which we all know about, where journalists who do build up a following in the traditional media outlets and powerhouses that we've mentioned earlier, a lot of them are now, starting their own Substacks and going down a personal subscription.
Yeah.
Because they've got an audience that like what they say and the way that they say it. So they're almost building their own news brands because they don't want to be part of the media empire anymore. And I think that's part of the bigger shift that we were talking about earlier. So
let me pick up on this. I want to pick up on it from the audio point of view and Clubhouse. I really want to pick up on where Clubhouse is going, because Clubhouse is, at this stage, free, and there's 10 million users and they love it. You know, there's just a growing appetite for this. At the moment, it's only on iPhone, but I'm sure that's just because it caught them by surprise. I'm sure it wasn't deliberate, and they'll come to Android eventually. And Twitter Spaces might fill that gap. That in itself is an interesting discussion. The other question I really want to pick up on is Parler, P-A-R-L-E-R, a supposedly free-thinking app, but it seems to be very right-wing in my opinion. I seem to go there and I get this really, what did you call it, Retrumplicon? What a great word. You know, I get this sort of very biased, one-dimensional right-wing view, in my opinion, when I've gone there and the stuff that I've seen. It doesn't resonate with my views of the world at all. So I'm not going to hang out there. But if it did, you would hang out there more. And then suddenly you're hanging out, as Simon just said, you're hanging out more with the people that you're digging, and you're getting this view of the world that sort of strengthens your positioning. So that's fascinating. So I want to come back to Parler, but I want to run the room as it relates to Clubhouse, because Clubhouse is free, and that's great, but it's going to just fall over.
Only in beta, Keith.
It's going to fall over if we don't monetize it. So what do you think will happen with Clubhouse? Starting with Elaine, how are they going to monetize it, and will it survive?
I think it could survive. Here's the thing: it's still in beta. I think the bottom line is to make it delicious enough to sell.
Yeah, okay. To sell the product, or to sell it as a monthly fee?
To sell Clubhouse. I don't think it was ever expected to be allowed to grow exponentially under the current ownership. That's just my feeling from what I've seen. But it's like anything. If you only allow people with shoulder-length hair to buy your product, then everybody else is going to want it way more, no matter what it does or doesn't do, only because they can't have it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just how we work. And I have just a quick question for Tony. When you first saw Parler, did you not think it was Parlay?
Well, of course, right?
Thank you. That's what happens when you live in a bilingual country.
Yeah.
Yeah. But back to Clubhouse.
I love how Keith says Parler. Keith say Parler.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
You need the hard rolling R. Parler.
Absolutely.
And I know it's hard for the Aussie accent.
And then it's going to be different from west to east, even, right, Elaine? Like parlor.
Oh my God!
And what's the French reference? What was the
parlay,
reference to French?
Yeah, parlay.
To speak.
And what does that mean?
To speak.
P-A-R-L-E means to talk.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
It's the verb to talk.
I originally thought it was just hanging out in the parlor, like there's a bit of a sort of a clubhouse.
Not
parlor.
Yeah,
it's parlor, right?
Yeah.
That's a different.
See, and if I try a French accent from the West, it's just blown, right? Like,
parlez-vous français?
See, parlez-vous. Yeah, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
Parlez-vous le français?
Wait.
Yeah,
but
we'll run the room. We'll run the room on Parler in a minute, because that's a very clear understanding of the fact.
Et toi?
And Keith, don't get me started on Clubhouse in the club. You know my beef with that.
No, look, I want to see, because
get me started with Apple.
Let me pick up on this. I don't have an iPhone. I don't have an iPad. Am I going to go and buy one just to use this site that someone told me once is nice? I'm not. And so I'm almost coming in from the Android user's point of view.
Come on, you're missing out.
There it is. See, it's the fear of missing out. And
it's
so
the clickers. It's the group. They're in. Once they get in, they try to get everybody else in.
And I'm stoical. I'm in my corner. Now.
They're like this. They're like this. Here,
now you've really got me started.
Well,
I've got some Kool-Aid here. You want to have this Kool-Aid? It's good.
Yeah,
Kool-Aid.
well, the Kool-Aid is Elon Musk and Kanye West, God help us, chatting, with,
and then I was going to
with-
say about your whole Trumplican there, right? Is
Yeah.
a couple of years ago in the last event I went to in San Francisco for Think 2019, I got
Yeah.
a really cool hat. I got a red hat, right?
Oh,
Well, you
dear
can't
Lord.
wear that red hat anymore. No, you don't wear
No.
that red hat. Yeah.
because it's
I
MAGA.
have to accredit Jimmy Kimmel. That is not my word. That is Jimmy Kimmel's word. Trumplican. So let's give credit where it's due.
But I mean, the reason I'm interested in Clubhouse and also Parler as a separate idea is that Clubhouse is this site that has, out of nowhere, for a reason I can't personally understand, become really popular. And what we've all seen is Blab and Meerkat, and even to a certain extent MySpace, come and go and disappear. And I can't help but think that unless something happens, this wonderful idea called Clubhouse, which 10 million people love, will go away. And so I'm really interested in, first of all, why is it popular? And second of all, how can they monetize? How can they keep going? How can they pay the bills?
I think Elaine's right. I think they want to get gobbled up. I think it's like,
Yes, they
who's
do.
going to add it on?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be an add-on to one of the bigger platforms. And it's just the fact that voice has appeal, right? Like, voice has a place.
Voice has appeal, and it's cheap and easy. You don't, as a woman, have to get dressed and put on all kinds of makeup and yada yada lighting and blah blah blah. You don't need any of that. You can be
Yeah,
sitting
that's
in
why I
your
started a
dirty
podcast,
back.
is because you can listen to it from your car. Yeah.
You gonna go? You gonna go, mate?
Yes,
You gotta
guys
go?
have to do that too, Doyle. You're absolutely right. But
What,
one thing
Doyle,
I-
you don't just look like that? Come on. You just wake up and shake that hair.
I gotta put this
it's really long,
on.
by the way.
Oh, fluff up the hair.
I'm giving you the 1 hour warning. If you need to go and run that, you can. We're coming up to 12 o'clock here in Australia, so that gives people an excuse. If they need to go, they can. I thought that might have been what you were doing there, putting your hand up to leave or wave. But
No.
Doyle, why do you think Clubhouse is popular, and how do you think they'll monetize it?
It's popular because it kind of it's one of those human needs, I guess, and it's a simple need, as Elaine was saying. Like it's not complex, it's not sophisticated. Everybody has talked about Zoom fatigue, and part of one of the reason is there's no emotional connection, and it's also a video, so you have to know that people are looking at you and watching you and seeing you and that sort of thing. So I think emotionally it takes up a lot less energy. You can just plug in your headset or your wireless earbuds, and away you go. You listen, and if you want to talk, you talk, and if you don't, nobody knows you're there. And I think that's
and how do they monetize it? How do they keep going? How do they keep going? Will someone buy them?
It can be. Yeah, I personally believe that too. That they're just, the play is getting bought out by one of the big guys as soon as possible, and the test is proving that it's very, very good at audience building, and that means that it's sort of really tying into something, one of those social media needs, I guess, in the hierarchy.
It pulls in Instagram because there's no direct messaging. It pulls in Twitter because those are the two things that you can add to your bio. So it's already reaching tentacles out to make sure that it's being seen by the right apps, if you will, and the right developers.
Yeah. So it's either
run out of space.
They either monetize it through selling the business, and the founders get paid out, or you look at a traditional model where maybe it's advertising, or maybe it's membership, or maybe it's some combination of that too. It's
let's
really
bring
hard.
Simon in. Let's bring Simon in on this, because you've asked a couple of questions throughout the course of this 1 hour so far. First of all, you've alluded to the fact that voice is huge and that you personally use it a lot. Second of all, I'm really interested in the idea of how Clubhouse is going in Europe. And third, you particularly did a Twitter poll about what would happen if a lookalike came, and 84% of people concurred that it'll probably be Twitter that takes them on. So what are your thoughts about Clubhouse, about why it's popular, and how do you think they'll monetize it?
Yeah, I think I would concur with what Doyle was saying. There's a lot of that happening. You can just listen in. It's like, on one hand, it's a never-ending library of sort of mini podcasts going on, and it's a mixture of people who like hearing their own voice, people who are authorities on everything but don't have a lot of experience. However, on the other side of that coin, Keith, there are some really interesting people on it. I personally have stopped going to the big rooms. If I'm not on the stage, I'm pulling back now. And I found about 20, 30 people sort of the sweet spot. If you get 5 or 6 people that know what they're doing, that's kind of where I'm spending my time there. Yeah. To your point, Elaine, it is a bit frustrating when you start on Clubhouse because everybody starts from zero. You wear a party hat because you're a newbie for a week. It's private invite only. You can only use it on iOS. So they're doing everything right in terms of this is how you get noticed. It's scarcity, right? They're doing it the right way. Having said that, you were saying it's come out of nowhere, but I think in March, if I'm not right in saying, it's been around a year. So it has been around for quite a while. It's only reaching these shores in the last month, though. So over this side of the world, we're only really playing with it about a month, whereas some people were on it last year. So, Elaine, were you going to say something there?
Well, I was going to say it looks like it sort of caught on, if you will, around November, because there was kind of bits and pieces going on, but you've got some really big hitters in social that, like, I don't know when these people are sleeping, because it doesn't matter when you wander in there, they're there running a room. And you're right, there are some ludicrously large rooms that when they have to reshuffle, you can't even see who it is that's speaking, which makes it a little bit awkward at times because it's a little hard to connect with people you're not sure of. But it reminds me, Keith, of early Hangouts. It was something new. People wanted to give it a try, like long before Blab. Hangouts and Zoom built on the same platform. It was something completely different because you could put a bunch of people together. And that's really what it is. It's people being able to connect. They could not have timed it better because the pandemic has made this, people are desperate to connect.
They're having scaling issues. Go ahead, Doyle.
I was going to say timing. I honestly, if they had launched like 6 months earlier, then they would have been, potentially at the peak where COVID was at the peak and people were looking for an alternative. It obviously it's still pretty high, don't get me wrong, but I think it could have had a larger audience if they had planned that. I think that was just coincidence, quite honestly.
I was going to add that sorry, Elaine, I was going to add that we were talking earlier about Google and Facebook and Amazon and that, and there's again, thank goodness that they were around during the pandemic, right? So for all the where's the news, what's happening with the news, all that argument that's going on and fake news and all that, but thank goodness we were a connected planet during the pandemic, right? So more power to them. They've done an awful lot right too. So I just wanted to put that in there. Back to Clubhouse for a second. I would agree. I think it'll be acquired by somebody. Because most of some of the celebrities are on there, and you see the servers are struggling to scale. The server error messages popping up every day. I heard there's 50 to 80,000 people waiting to get clubs, as in an official club, and they just can't get through the backlog. It's a little bit to me like at the moment, like the Twitter blue check mark. At the moment, it's just an urban legend that used to exist, and they're really struggling to scale it. I think it's in its infancy in terms of what happens when they do have to monetize. I don't think they will either. The smart money's on the fact it'll just be acquired soon. But the competitors,
and I'll do a dramatic. I got to run and I got to hop, but just like Clubhouse. And just like I'm hopping off, I'm out of the club. I'm not an iOS guy, right?
Yeah.
So
let me give everyone permission to go. It's coming up to the hour. I know Elaine and Tony are thinking it's pretty late there. So if you need to go, and Deb, I'm thanking you so much for coming. Do you want to hang around
Thanks,
for 10
guys.
minutes,
Thanks.
2 minutes, and just give us a last run. So that's the 1 hour warning. So please feel free to jump off. But I'm going to give Deb the floor because she hasn't had really a good chance to have a chat, and we really designed the show around her. So hang around for 2 minutes. Elaine, it's getting late there. Feel free to go. So Deb, tell us about what you're doing. And
I'll hear Deb and then I'll be off.
Okay.
My
Deb,
dear Elaine.
we ran the whole show around Google, but look, there's a lot of things happening here. One is, why is Facebook doing what they're doing? Is Clubhouse a thing, and will it get bought? Twitter Spaces, will it take off, and will it replace it, and Parler, if indeed you've got an opinion on Parler? So just give us a wrap up before you go, because I know it's late there. But what are you thinking?
Thank you. Well, it's interesting because when per invite only, actually Gmail started out that way. If you all remember, Gmail was per invite only. So that FOMO issue with Clubhouse, and not being a Mac user either, we have that moment of like, oh, wow, we can't get onto this. And I've seen a lot of my colleagues and people in this industry that I want to be a part of it, but I have to step back. So that I see, as Elaine has alluded to, this being bought out by something bigger. I believe that's absolutely the case of where Clubhouse is going. And that's just by what I've heard, what I've read, and what I've seen. So that's issue that I'm going to start out with that. With Google, back to Google. Google's not going away. Google's not going away. Google is too big. Alphabet is too big. It's too massive. It's going to either concede or it's going to compromise. I don't think it's going to be pushed out of any particular country. And if it does, it could be a detriment to, as I said, to the end user. So I don't believe that there's benefit for Google to step back or step out. Facebook, that's an interesting one because certainly my Elaine is very Facebook oriented, and I'm sure many of you are. I've never been on Facebook, only to run campaigns for clients, but it has its place. And since I've been in pure SEO and PPC, I come from an advertising background, I tend to run to search. And so if it isn't Google, then it's Bing, because Bing is something that we haven't brought up at all. And Bing runs 1/3 of the web. And Bing also,
is it that big now?
Yeah, it is. It's 1/3 of the web. And so, and a lot of people don't even realize when they're turning on their brand new computers that they're jumping onto Microsoft Edge. And so they're already on Bing. So, I think that we're a lot in my industry as marketers, as digital marketers, that we have to pay proper attention to Bing because Bing isn't going away. Bing's Microsoft product, and it is definitely has its place in the market. So,
and how do they play this game out? Do they pay straight up, or do they go into the market with a sort of a hard-ass attitude, or do they play the middle ground? How do they play this debate out?
Mean for Bing ads?
Well, for the idea of paying for news and paying for the services.
That's a really good question, Keith, because I have heard nothing about this. I think Bing has been pretty silent. Has anybody else? Bing has really kept closed.
I think the CEO of Microsoft, did he not reach out to the Australian government and say, look, we're here. If you need us, if Google do pull out, we're here. I mean, why wouldn't you say that if you were the Microsoft CEO? And to Deborah's point, it is used with lots of pockets around the world. The other point that you made me think about, Deborah, real quick, is that talking back to Facebook, some people's internet world is just within Facebook. In the same way that some people's internet world is just Pinterest. And sometimes if you're a digital savvy or you're digitally native and you understand all the different tools and platforms and how it's all put together, we sort of jump between them all. But for a lot of people, they spend they're just talking to family and friends on Facebook. That's their internet. And so we can't lose track of that either. So when things get turned off in the primary source, it does create issues. But there is competition. And competition in this instance, I think, is a good driver because it helps keep everybody a little bit more honest than maybe they wouldn't have been.
Well, can I ask you then, Simon, what you think about Twitter Spaces, and will it fill the void for Android users?
I've been on Twitter Spaces a couple of times now, Keith, and I found the user experience, the UX side of it, to be actually pretty good. I love the fact that it's connected to, you know, a community that you've already built. The thing that I'm thinking about a lot is the voice product or the voice service offering or social voice, whatever you want to call it, the Clubhouse brings, and the power that would have on LinkedIn. Now that's my,
I've thought of LinkedIn too.
you know, LinkedIn is my sort of global Rolodex, you know, and I've got
Right.
a huge global connections there. But some of that Clubhouse functionality on LinkedIn would be extremely useful, because I'm finding I'm taking people from Clubhouse onto LinkedIn or onto Twitter or onto Instagram. I think, Elaine, you were talking about that earlier. It's like the Twitter direct messages and chat and connections and Instagram messages. It's the back channel for Clubhouse. That's just the way it's working at the moment. There's no other way of doing it. But if you then want to connect with somebody, today I was on a conversation today with somebody about investment in the VC tech world, and that conversation actually began on Clubhouse, but then became an actual conversation.
Let me just give Deb permission to go. I asked you for 10 minutes and they're up. If you need to go, if it's getting late, you can go. And if everyone wants to go, I want to give you permission to do that. And we'll keep the conversation going around Twitter Spaces and LinkedIn. So feel free to go if you need to go. But what you're saying there, Simon, is thank you, Elaine. I really, really appreciate all your wisdom.
Guys. Lovely to see you all.
Thanks, Elaine.
Quite a pleasure. It's been great to spend this time with you guys. Lots of knowledge here. Thanks again, Keith. Have a beautiful night, everybody.
Thanks, Deborah.
No worries. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
But Simon, you've mentioned a couple of things. You did a whole Twitter poll around Twitter Spaces. That's where I think it'll go. But I believe if Microsoft bought Clubhouse, it would be a phenomenal offering. I don't know if they're thinking of making one themselves, but you've already seen the synergy, haven't you? You think that if LinkedIn bought Clubhouse, it could really do some magic, couldn't it?
I think it could, particularly in the B2B space, because at the moment Clubhouse it's a B2C product at the moment. It's individuals talking to individuals. The big brands aren't really there. You know, there's people talking about news, but there's no major brands pushing their arguments on the channel yet. I think that will come in time. The other thing
disappeared, Simon.
Pardon?
I think Keith disappeared.
He did disappear. He left us on our own. Yeah.
All right, we're taking this is Pirate StreamYard. Coming to you from Australia and Ireland.
Completely while he's not here.
Yeah, really. Too funny. Well, where's the control panel? I want to push some buttons.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I'm sorry. We lost you, but
still live, so.
We're still live. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. But this is a very good opportunity to wrap up. And a really great conversation with Simon calling in from Ireland again. Remember, years ago, 2019, the reason we're starting this show is in 2019, Simon and I got together and said, I did this event in Jamaica. And I'm really digging what you're doing there, man. And let's do it again. And we did. Yeah. But we're actually going to run this event in Jamaica again. And in the 2 years since we've been working together, many things have happened. And you can see here. Yeah. You can see here now what StreamYard looks like. Is that what you're using for live streaming? What do you use? Or have you been live streaming?
Limited live streaming, and most of the stuff that I'm doing is pre-recorded and then pushed out, particularly on the live event side. And that's predominantly because of end user bandwidth issues, technical problems, and quality. So I have a big event coming up now, March 8th to 12th. I've got the Think Global Forum Summit Week, and I've got a couple of, like a vice president from Condé Nast speaking at it. I've got Mark Pollock, who's like a registered blind athlete explorer who did a race to the South Pole. He's a Commonwealth medal winner speaking at it, etc. Those will be live, but we'll also record some of that stuff. But most of the stuff I think is still in the can and then published. But live streaming on the platforms is more and more popular. So even outside of things like the platform we're on today, you know, a lot of the Facebooks and the LinkedIn and YouTube, I know you're pushing this out via StreamYard to YouTube, I think, today, Keith.
Have you got LinkedIn Live yet?
I do, yeah. I do have LinkedIn Live. I'm not using it a whole lot, but I'm an avid
Very
LinkedIn
key.
user, but I'm not pushing much out on live. Maybe I should be, but I'm not.
It depends
What
what
do
you
you-
want
what
to
do
do.
you-
On that point, Keith, no, just back to like Microsoft owning or wanting to buy, let's say, Clubhouse. Theoretically, I honestly think they fumbled the football, so to speak, when they bought LinkedIn, because they really haven't. I believe they haven't really
No,
necessarily
I haven't.
leveraged that,
Not even close.
particularly with live, LinkedIn Live and that sort of thing. So they're missing a few pieces, which is fine. But what could they become if they actually leveraged, for example, LinkedIn Live, and then something like Clubhouse, like that?
Well,
could be
they also bought Skype, Doyle, right? So that Skype went in, and I'm not sure what happened there. Now we have Teams, which is quite
true.
in the enterprise
Yeah.
space, so there is a fit for it,
Well, it's a very interesting story because we've all seen Blab come and go. We've all seen Meerkat come and go.
Yeah, Meerkat.
And
I was using
we're all,
Meerkat for a long time. Yeah, it was a very popular product for a little while. And then Periscope took over. I think Twitter Periscope was popular too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Meerkat Periscope analogy is very prominent here because Meerkat came first. It was awesome. Twitter bought Periscope, and then Meerkat went away.
Yep.
It's closed down out of nowhere. Gary Vee put big money into it. Like, he went real all out. He put a couple of million, and he really got behind it. And out of nowhere, it just stopped. And I mean, Blab that was the biggest disappointment in my professional career. I spent hours on that site.
Is it any different to Foursquare and then Swarm? Is it any different to VHS and Betamax?
Yeah.
It's just an ongoing battle. Some survive, some don't. Some adapt, some don't. Some get that startup cash that helps them keep going for a little bit longer, and some don't, or they have to pull the plug because they can't afford it anymore too. So I think it's a I mean, there's obviously a cost to it, but the whole ecosystem of digital is phenomenal, and it's you got to get it out there and test it and see if it works. And you know what? Sometimes it's not going to work, whether it's customer acquisition or who pays the bills, or just getting adoption rate going too. Like there's so many issues.
It's what's hard to quantify, I think, Doyle, and just going back to the Clubhouse phenomenon, is how much of it is pandemic driven. What happens when when people are vaccinated en masse in most developed countries and hopefully developing countries too? What happens then? And what happens? So the competition for me is a big element with audio, and what they do, what the competitors do, what products and where they take it to. I think that's a big challenge. And also what happens when you're not locked down anymore. For lots of, like in Ireland, we've been locked down 3 times now, and it's been gradually worse. Whereas the neighbours across the water in the UK now, they're coming out of it. They're announcing their vaccination program is way ahead, and they're now starting to reopen their society again for the second time. Ireland will be following suit towards the summer, subject to vaccine availability. And
have you got one yet? Is it rolled out yet?
Personally, I don't know, but I do have some older relatives who have had it only in the last week. Whereas I have relatives in the UK market who have had it now 2 or 3 weeks ago. But I think people like me, who's a little bit slightly younger age profile, and of course, anything younger than me, which isn't hard. That's a lot of people. They're just on a waiting list. It's quite a slow rollout here because it's been purchased by the EU and shared between EU countries. So you get an allotment,
Yeah, Keith and I aren't slated to get it until I think May,
June, July, isn't it? June, July,
or something like that. Yeah. So based on our age, and Keith's older than me, just so you know. But I wanted to ask you though, Simon. Like, you talked a lot about changing behaviors. Do you think fundamentally that everything will change back to pre-COVID, or there's obviously going to be some that continues type thing?
It's the new normal discussion, isn't it, Doyle?
Yeah.
I think it. I mean, look,
Curious.
I think there's 2 types of people that I see. There's people that have really struggled with it and hate every minute of it, and maybe they're a little bit more extroverted. Maybe they need the more social interaction. And then there's the opposite side of that coin where they haven't really been that bothered by it. They live in this digital connected world anyway. They spend a lot of time online. Maybe they're a little bit more introverted, and has it really impacted things? I deal with a lot of international businesses as well, and there are some businesses and some sectors that have really struggled, and some people have had real hardships. And of course, the death toll is an absolute tragedy. And I think there's lots of learning. I don't think we've even begun to figure out the learnings and the missteps lots of governments, lots of countries have taken around the world. But I think it's hybrid, right? Everybody says that. I think it's blended. I can't see the average workforce wanting to go back to the cubicle way of working anymore. I just can't see it. I've seen very large multinational companies, not just in the tech sector, who are saying work from home forever, work from anywhere, come in a day or two a week if you want to. And I think anybody that was doubtful about whether home working was possible for the majority of the, let's say, professional services industry have suddenly realized that, wow, this is incredible. It's been very interesting to me to work with brands and companies who've actually increased their business during the pandemic. Now, obviously, if you're in the hospitality or the airline sector, that's been a little bit different. But if you're in anywhere close to the tech sector or providing services digitally, there are businesses that are absolutely exploding at the moment. You know, they can't keep up with how fast the demand is. And I know I'm speaking from a very privileged perspective because I've been very fortunate too in that perspective. But I think it's been on long enough for it to fundamentally change things. And the other thing to add to what you were asking me there, Doyle, is I think I'm old enough to remember when somebody brought a video camera into the house for the first time and nobody wanted to be on it because they didn't want to hear themselves on camera. And I'm also old enough to remember cassette tapes when you could hear your own voice and everybody said, "Oh, that's not me. That I don't sound like that." Right? We've all done that. And I think in the last year or two, people that weren't used to doing this kind of conversation over video have got more comfortable with it. And I think Clubhouse, we in audio, and you can turn your camera off like we were talking about earlier, that's helped propel it too. So I think there is a new way of working, cutting out of commutes, not having to sit in airports every day of the week, not having to commute in and out of a major city. That's all a big plus. But there are watch outs as well. I think you still have to have structure that helps you get through the day, because you can go too far the other way then as well. So
let me pick up on that, Simon. When we were working together in 2019, well before the pandemic even was thought of, and even a risk, I did the event in May 2019. I deliberately did not fly to Jamaica.
Yeah, I remember.
And a mutual friend of ours from Dublin ran, and Doyle loved this idea when I told him. She hired out a room in the airport. And the idea was you would fly in from any European city in the morning, have breakfast, have this really great event, fly home, be home for dinner.
Yeah.
Great idea. But 2 days before, we don't have to mention who it is, 2 days before, she's going, "Mate, I'm still 3,000 euros behind."
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I hired the room. I got speakers. I put all this marketing in, and I'm actually going to lose money.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, man, why are you doing that? Why are you running an event to lose money? Sure, having an event is great, but I've got plenty of things I'd rather spend my money on if I'm going to lose money. And I don't know if she broke even or if the event was great. There's no doubt the event was great, but it cost her a lot of money and she actually ended up losing money. She didn't recoup her costs. And I remember at that time, 2019, we were having this chat. Well, how do we cut out some of those layers? Flying in for a start.
Yeah,
having accommodation, home 3 meals a day in a foreign city, having all this accommodation budget, food budget. As what's happened lately since we've been chatting all that time ago, has it changed your perspective, or is it even sort of hardened your perspective on why you don't want to commute?
Yeah, it has a little bit. I mean, this thing here, the Think Global Forum, which I'm involved in, that's been going about 4 or 5 years now. The last physical event took place actually in Amsterdam. And that was in January last year, I think. So COVID was about. It hadn't quite filtered into my neck of the woods. And I think if it had been a month later, definitely by March, it wouldn't have gone ahead.
Yeah.
So January last year, I think, was the last physical event. And, those events were typically, nice hotels, meals, speakers on stage, camera crew, all that type of stuff, networking afterwards, the usual sort of conference that you'd expect. And prior to that, they'd taken place in New York, Los Angeles, San Diego, Dublin, of course, London, quite a few in London as well. And, really, really enjoyed doing those. And there was something special about the human connection and meeting in person. But honestly, in the last 12 months, the whole community has had to move online. It wasn't because Simon said, well, look, we're not doing them in person anymore. We just couldn't. So we moved the Think Global Awards, which is sort of like an offshoot of the Think Global Forum. That's now in its 4th year. That'll be online. We're giving the awards out on April this year for the people that submitted entries up to December last year. And the previous year, we did the awards digitally as well. And that was a last-minute rush last year because we couldn't go ahead. We normally have 2 award ceremonies in the US.
And you had to do some last-minute rethinking.
We had to change it completely. So we've actually seen the forum grow, and we've seen the interest grow. And the couple of speakers that I was talking to you about earlier, I saw the conference business dip significantly, but now paid speakers, their fees have dropped a little bit, depending on who they are, because it's digital and they don't have to travel as much, and there's not the hotel fees involved and the planes. But the conference business is very much back. The ticket prices are normally cheaper, but I don't know if you're finding the same as I am. I've really benefited from not having to travel to Austin, Texas to do South by Southwest, or spend a week traveling to a different country for a conference that's only taking place for 2 days, but it takes a day to get there and a day to get back.
Well, you got 4 kids. I mean, you could be spending time with them.
Yeah. So maybe I'll go back to conferencing. No, I'm
I actually posited that.
I think it'll be both, right? It'll be both.
What do you think? What do you think, Doyle? Do you think post-pandemic people will simply go back to going out into the city, or do you think we've learnt from it? There is got to be a hybrid, surely.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where things are headed too, is that there are people who enjoy the connections and that's fantastic. And there's always going to be that need for human connections as well. But I always look at it from the business perspective. It's like, if you can reach an audience around the world, anytime, any place, anywhere, why wouldn't you? So instead of having just a conference in Margaret River, Western Australia kind of thing, where my local market is quite small, or everybody has to come in and attend, you can reach an audience around the world. And to me, that's the brilliant part about that, is that if you're set up to do it, you can do it. And you obviously could have done this before COVID, but there really wasn't a sort of a trigger to say, hey, wait a sec, I need to look at my business model, how I actually offer value. And maybe it doesn't need to be, a conference, again, in a small town or a big city. It doesn't really matter. You're still bringing people in. If you can reach those people elsewhere, why not? Why wouldn't you? But you have to be able to create that experience. And that's obviously something that we talk about an awful lot too, is how do you actually create that experience that does
how do you do that, Simon? How do you create a digital experience that replicates or even improves on real life?
Well, the ones I've done to date have been, day events, which I basically replicated the physical events into just digital events. But for the summit week that's coming up, which is the Monday through Friday next month, it's called the Summit Week. But I purposely have been discussing with the Think Global Forum team that we're only going to do it for 2 hours a day: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
That's a common model now, isn't it? Just 2 or 3 hours a night.
I think we've learned that over the last year or so, the last 18 months or so, that asking people to turn up to a conference that starts at 9 in the morning and finishes at 5 in the evening or 6 in the evening, and then a networking session afterwards, even though the speakers are really compelling, it's a long slog when you're going, for anybody who's done back-to-back Zoom meetings, that it can take a toll after several days.
Especially if it's online. Yeah. You need that mental break, that you need to recharge your your battery.
Send me some data about that, because I did a gig in LA about
Yeah.
with that in mind. 10 days in a row, 2 weekends with a week in between.
Yeah.
And that would have normally been Friday, Saturday, Sunday, go home Monday if it was a physical event, right, in the beach, California, really lovely. Fly in or drive in Friday night, stay Saturday, Sunday, have a bit of a cruise, go home Sunday night, or maybe even sleep in and go home Monday. But now what they did for 10 days, 2 weekends and the week in between, 2 hours a night.
Right.
And what that meant was that people could do their day with whatever, walk the dog, go to work, have a swim, and then 2 hours. It was very targeted. I think that's a model that I can see replicated again. I'm very interested to see what you're doing there.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it with you, Keith. I'll send you something. But there's also, we're doing a little yoga session online as well, which will be quite interesting. We've done a couple of those now. And we've tried to get speakers. It's not just all business, just to break it up a little bit.
Yeah.
The Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are going to be more sort of discussion groups with, people focused around 2 or 3 topics. Whereas the Monday and the Friday are more sort of keynote type things with a bit of yoga thrown in and a bit of fun. So, look,
Nice.
I'll let you know how it goes. There's a lot of planning goes in behind the scenes, even though it's digital and virtual and not in person. But thankfully, I've got a great team working with me on the Think Global Forum. So,
Including, are you still working with Monique? She's still in the business?
she's doing a managing editor now. She's got a magazine and a couple.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
she's doing
global speakers.
She's also doing something on the cooking side. Actually, she's got a chef channel as well, where she's doing
gorgeous Brazilian woman. Jeez,
food. She's really nice, really nice lady. Yeah, I have a lot of time.
I
for
have to go pretty soon, Keith.
Yeah,
but I just want to actually.
Why don't we wrap it up?
Well, we can wrap it up. But just honestly, maybe the conference experience previously was that escape that people were looking for as well, just to kind of throw it out there. It's like it's great because you can go away for 2 days or 3 days or whatever. You kind of leave all your problems behind. You go to this conference and you have a good time and you meet new people and away you go. So it might have been an escape back then. But
I think so. Though I think at an enterprise level, there was an awful lot of business done at those physical conferences.
Yeah, true. There absolutely was.
It was the meal in the evening in the hotel.
Yeah.
Or the fancy place that you've hired. That's where the real discussions took place, not necessarily even on the conference floor, but that's missing at the moment,
Yeah.
We're trying to find some ways to bring that back, but Doyle has to go. It's very late there, so I'm
gonna go. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm still in the morning, so
okay. We'll see you guys later then.
I gotta take off. But thanks, Keith. Thanks, Simon. It was a fantastic conversation, and I enjoyed it.
See you later.
Good to be here. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.